A year ago, I uncovered the secret that shattered everything. My sister Natalie, the family's golden child, was having an affair with my ex-boyfriend. Now, my parents want me to forgive her. But how do you forgive a betrayal this deep? I never thought my life would spin out of control at age 28, with the people I trusted most turning against me. My family was supposed to be my rock. They busted it into 1,000 pieces. The older sister, Natalie, was the golden child. Mom and Dad celebrated all her successes, from graduation from high school to her wedding day. I was always the just good enough daughter, always the afterthought. 1 year ago, my sister and her boyfriend Mike returned to town from abroad, where they lived for several years. That was when I realized that Mike was the same ex-boyfriend I had fallen in love with while studying abroad in college, and that we were all classmates. Natalie, Mike, and I. We had broken up a few years ago due to some issues, but no one besides Natalie knew. After our breakup, Mike started dating Natalie, and when they returned to our town, I sensed that Mike still had feelings for me. I couldn't accept that Natalie had a relationship with someone I had once loved and had separated from. I felt like I was losing my mind, thinking that because he was my ex-boyfriend, he shouldn't have the right to get a friend or marry someone else. They had already been together for 5 years, and everybody loved Mike, especially my parents. He was magnetic with people, a gelled and successful fellow who appeared perfect for Natalie. Wherever he went, all eyes focused on him. But there was just something about the way he looked at me. I kept writing it off as I imagined. After all, he was my sister's boyfriend now, and he loved my sister, or so I thought. My long-term boyfriend James and I decided to move in together. It was our fresh start, a chance to finally have something that was mine. We rented a lovely apartment just a few blocks from my parents' house, and life seemed perfect. I spent my days working as a graphic designer, filling up pages of my creativity on projects. James goes into work at this finance firm, really encouraging me to pursue my dreams. He had been a great source of encouragement, but I do have my own doubts. I often felt overshadowed by my sister's achievements. But things got better soon after Natalie and Mike came by more often. Strange. At first, I thought it was my nerves about living with James. The three of us would sit down for dinner and Mike would crack little jokes that seemed too personal, too intimate. He'd inch in a little closer to me, his laughter lingering a beat too long. Natalie would laugh her way alongside me, her eyes sparkling merrily. Yet, I caught that flicker of something else beneath the surface, a tension, an understanding that was close and just a little too close. I tried to brush it away and convince myself it was just sibling teasing, yet my gut told me something was off. One evening, I invited some people over for dinner to celebrate my promotion at work. I had been working hard, hoping it would finally get me in the family's limelight. My parents, Natalie and Mike, came around our tiny table to enjoy my homemade pasta and wine. All were filled with laughter, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension beneath its surface. Mike's looks had lingered a little too long, and Natalie was drawing too much attention to himself to ensure he did not shift his eyes. So, I assisted my sister in the dinner preparations while tidying up afterward, glancing through her phone's long string of text messages. I thought they were just friends and that they didn't have a sexual relationship. These flirtatious messages were full of inside jokes that sounded far too intimate to be between friends. Suddenly, my heart sank, and my mind hit. They were having an affair. The most challenging thing I ever had to do was confront Natalie. I had always admired her, idolizing her for her self-confidence and charm. But that night, when the evidence began to make its way to her wall, denial stared me in the face. "You're being ridiculous, Jess. Mike and I are just close. You're overreacting." But the tears in her eyes said a different truth. And then, one day into another, weeks went by, but all that tension in my family grew palpable. I could not believe that my sister could betray me like this. I was lost, betrayed on every level by her and my family. My parents, ever so patient enablers, refused to see the truth. They got caught up in the mentality of protecting the family image, so they urged me to apologize to Natalie and be the bigger person. They wanted me to smooth it out and put the conflict under the rug as if covering it over would resolve it all. But inside I was furious. How could my sister, to whom all my confidences had been given, betray me like that? I thought about how many times I had defended her, from her victories to her defeats, and she stabbed me in the back. She created a storm cloud against which my resentments churned with every single encounter. Then, There was the day that blew everything apart. Natalie turned up at my apartment unannounced, face pale, hands shaking. "Jess, we need to talk," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought maybe it was about Mike, but what hit me in the face like a punch to the gut was when she said, "I'm pregnant." The room around me turned to haze as she opened her mouth. "I don't know what to do. I love Mike but can't lose you as my sister." She begged me to understand and forgive, but all that ran through my mind was betrayed. The fresh air filled with rage as I stormed out, feeling that space would work wonders for me, my heart pounding in anger and disbelief. How could she expect me to be glad for her? This is a child born of betrayal. Weeks went by. One day, my parents announced they wanted to throw a party for the whole family as they welcomed Natalie due to her pregnancy. They were ignoring me and making a celebration out of something that hurt me the most. This was like everyone had hatched a plan against me as if to make me believe that all was well, that nothing was wrong. I didn't attend the party, and when Natalie finally called crying, I felt bad and angry at the same time. How could I, the product of her adulterous affair, celebrate a child, a participant in this misdirection? The day of the party, I sat alone in my apartment, drowning in ice cream and wine. I'd been thinking about James through all of this. He's such a patient and kind soul, though, and even he was showing signs. "Jess, you need to talk to her. You can't keep running from this one," he urged one night. I nodded, but inside I was petrified. Too much fallout for my emotions to handle, I thought. I remember returning to Natalie after gathering all the courage to confront her again. She looked like a radiant woman, a pregnancy glow that made her seem to glow even more ideally, a state of affairs that was only a facade. I tackled her with the affair, with the lies. "How could you do this to me, Nat?" I shouted, sobbing. "You've ruined everything." She started crying and said that she didn't want to hurt me, but it was too late by then. She made my heart harden toward her, putting up a strong wall of betrayal and pain that could never be broken. The outcome was that I came out from that confrontation even emptier than before. How could she expect forgiveness when she had created a shambles of trust between us? Months passed by, and the gap between us only grew. Family meetings were unbearable. They were steeped in tension, and masks of forced smiles concealed the anguish. My parents attempted to be neutral, but it was obvious that they tended to favor Natalie and Mike. It was like being an invisible person as a family celebrated motherhood with my sister, and my sister's motherhood killed mine. I could no longer stand this situation. Hence, I began to drift away from my family. I needed to know myself better. Next came the day when I got promoted to work life. All the hard work I had put in over the years for the only possible success finally clicked, and I got promoted. It was to be a celebrative moment, but all I felt was hollow. My parents called up asking to meet us over lunch. I knew what they wanted to talk about: the baby, to pull me back into their narrative of family unity. I agreed to meet them, hoping for peace amidst this turmoil. When we sat at the table, I watched them beam with pride over Natalie's plans for a baby shower. Not even after dinner did they ask how I was doing. "You need to be excited for her, Jess. She's going through a lot right now," my mother said with a voice laced with disappointment. "Happy for her? She's having an affair with my ex-boyfriend, and you want me to accept it?" I shot back, anger swirling inside of me. "She betrayed me, and you're defending her." My father sighed, the annoyance evident. "You're being selfish, Jess. Family is everything. You need to be there for Natalie." With every word they spoke, my heart broke, the gap between them and me expanding further. After that lunch, I knew it was over for my sanity's sake. I started looking at building a career and friendships, and slowly beginning to make a life outside the family dynamics that had been suffocating me for too long. Work was enjoyable, as were new friendships and even some new hobbies that filled the space left by Natalie. Just when I had settled in, Natalie called. "Jess, I am sorry. I need you to come to the hospital. I am having a baby." She was shivering. Guilt and uncertainty came rushing into my emotions, along with my familiar anger. If, after all that, can she still expect me to be there? I hesitated, my mind racing. Why should I? You've betrayed me, Nat. You chose Mike over me. But on the other hand, there was that tiny part of me wanting to see her, wanting one final confrontation, everything in the open. After a long inner battle, I set out. Upon entering the hospital room, the air was heavy with suspense and fear. Then, when I saw Natalie holding her newborn in her arms, something inside me shifted in a way I did not know how to articulate. She looked up at me with eyes of fright and vulnerability. "Jess, I am so sorry. I know I hurt you, but please forgive me," she cried through tears running down her cheeks. In that instant, I realized how long I had been carrying this weight. Something had to give. I took in an inhalation of that glance at my walls, which were crumbling with him. "I cannot promise that I will forgive you at the moment, but I am willing to give it a shot," I said, finally allowing myself to feel a slight wash of relief cross over my body. It would be a long road, but it was a start. As I stood there with a small life cradled in her arms, emotions seemed to flood me. Without knowing the chaos of this existence, this baby would grow up where love and betrayal are intertwined between thorns like twigs. "And what are you going to name her?" I barely dared whisper. "Nora," Natalie said, eyes full of hope and sorrow. "I wanted to call her after you, Jess. You've always been my sister, my best friend." I felt a warmth spread through me. This may be the start of healing, of mending the broken pieces of our relationship. We could find our way back to each other. In the following weeks, I began going there more often. Every time I went, I felt a little lighter. We discussed everything: the affair, the betrayal, and the hardships of becoming a new mother. Natalie talked candidly about her mistakes, and so did I. It was painful and raw. And yet, talking about that elephant in the room was finally good. The healing process was complex. Sometimes I had to return to painful times, but I felt better prepared to deal with it every time I did it. I started to comprehend the intricacies of family dynamics, realizing that love and betrayal weren't mutually exclusive and could live in ways most unexpected. I learned how to navigate my feelings while keeping little Nora's best interest in mind. One night, after a pretty honest discussion, I told Natalie, "You know, we can start to make something of our relationship. It won't be the same as before, but perhaps we could build into something new." She welled at the corners of her eyes, and with an even more vigorous nod, she began shaking and said, "I would really love that, Jess. I have missed you so much." And as I stepped out that night, leaving the shadows of betrayal for the first time in 5 years, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was not going to be easy, and I knew this, but it was one I felt prepared to face head on. And for the first time in 5 years, I could finally breathe. Months had passed, and as I sat with friends to celebrate my birthday, I felt tremendous gratitude for everything that had transpired. Pain was no longer the fuel that empowered me. It became a driving force that fueled strength. Coming out of the dark place was hard enough, but resiliency swept over me in ways I never thought possible again. My relationship with Natalie was imperfect, but we were learning how to drive our new reality on Earth. I looked back at things and realized that sometimes family isn't about all the bonds that connect you, but forgiveness and understanding that heal the depths of wounds. I finally heard my voice clearly and more powerfully. But life had a way of testing our resolve. When I thought things were settling down, my parents sent me another message. They wanted to meet again. That made my heart drop, realizing they were still trying to bring us together and force reconciliation into us. That evening, I sat across from them in a small cafe packed with discussions and clinking forks. They started talking about family traditions and holidays we'd missed together, and I felt this knot in my stomach. "It's hard for me just to forget everything," I finally said, my voice breaking. "You wanted me to forgive Natalie and pretend this never happened." "Jess, we are family, for crying out loud," my mother said, urgency flooding every word. "We need to stand behind one another. Natalie needs you now more than ever, especially with the baby. She needs to take responsibility for what she is doing," I bellowed in anger. "You cannot just pretend this never happened because you want everything back to normal. Well, that's not going on. We are all in pain, Jess. This isn't about you. It's about healing as a family." With my heart racing, I couldn't wait to shout at the top of my lungs, "I won't be able to be a part of it if it means pretending that everything is okay." I looked over at him. I will not go back to that. However, that conversation made me feel the most conflicted in my life. I wanted to move on and embrace this newfound happiness, but my family was adamant about reconciliation. Whether I could forgive Natalie or my parents for what they made me endure had already started to cross my mind. I called James that night. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice quivering. "They're trying to drag me back into the mess, and I don't want to return to that pain." "Don't let them pull you back into their chaos, Jess," he said reassuringly. "You focus on what makes you happy, not on what they want you to be." Those words struck deep inside me. I recognized that family was necessary, but that my happiness could not be tied to their expectations. I had to do things right for my well-being and continued healing. After a few weeks, I came to face Nora's birth, as it were, in that very same hospital corridor. I was prepared for my new life and would not let the past dictate my future. I entered the room with excitement and apprehension. Natalie sat there, holding little Nora in her arms. A warmth glowed from her face. As I approached her, I was filled with a wave of love for my sister and baby. "Hey," I said softly, my heart swelling with emotion. "I've been thinking," I said slowly. "We can make new traditions, including little Nora." Hope lit up her eyes, and for the first time in quite a while, I felt the burden of the past start to roll off my shoulders. We sat there talking and laughing, with Nora cooing softly in her sleep, as if we were offered at least one glimpse of a future we could create together. That day, walking out of the hospital gave me an added purpose. Much healing still needed to be done, but I was prepared for all the hurdles ahead. My family could have been better, and we would never return to how things were. However, we could create something beautiful together, a new bond forged in love, understanding, and forgiveness. I knew that life would always be challenging, but I also knew I had the strength to face it head-on. I was Jess, the damaged sister, yet here I was now, rediscovering happiness day by day.